High of 305 points above 34,000 for the first time ever, up a full 1%. Biggest contributor to the Dow gains today was United Healthcare. Healthcare overall had a very strong session, best performing sector along with technology. S&P 500 closing at a record high, up 1.1%, second positive session in the last three, and we are on track for its fourth week in a row of gains. As far as the Nasdaq, technology playing a big role in today's rally, up 1.3%. Tech and consumer discretionary right up there as bond yields fell sharply.
Okay, so good afternoon. Give everybody a few minutes to log on. We're glad you could join. To those that are new to this podcast, it's our last one for the week. We do Monday through Thursday, unless there's some significant news story or something going on. But the good news is we can kind of get back to normal podcasts or about politics and issues and things going on in town and the state and even national level. And so talking to people today, certainly a lot of people were talking about the shooting. We're following up with police officers. I give a lot of credit to, I posted on Branford 7, an article by Pam Johnson, which was spectacular. Really good job by her interviewing three people who were somewhat in the line of fire, their experiences, and it shows a nice little idea of what the experience was like. It was brutal. It was harrowing. There's no question about that. And so, they happened to be there. Our police were there. They were in the line of fire. They were pinned down as well. Really a horrific event. And I still remain absolutely in shock that we are not attending funerals right now. Mind blowing to me that we went through that. We will talk a little bit about Bernie Madoff and the impact of that and his death yesterday. Yesterday or the day? It was yesterday, yeah. I watched about 12 different versions and books on Bernie Madoff. David White is a Branford resident whose friend is a Connecticut author who wrote a book on it as well. We'll talk about that a little bit. But, as we wind down from Tuesday, yesterday, and part of the conversations as people were talking in comments, about not seeing coverage, it is amazing that had someone been killed, had someone been shot, it would have been national news. And as much as we talked about guns and we talked about political issues, that's just the nature of once somebody is shot, the news jumps all over it. It pushes for controversy. It becomes controversial. It becomes political. And so often when we see change in government or laws, they're based not on logic or reason, but they're based on emotion. You have a groundswell of emotion and people overreact. I know when after Newtown, give a lot of credit to, at the time, our state representative in Guilford and part of Branford was Pat Whitlitz. And in a DTC meeting, a Democratic Town Committee meeting, she was the one, like the voice of reason. People are yelling, we need more laws, and ultimately more laws should pass. But she was the one who stopped and said, hold on a second. Let's not just pass something for the sake of passing something. And so we often do that. We pass something as a knee-jerk reaction. One of those bills, to a certain extent, was last year's police bill. Was it a great bill? No, it wasn't a great bill. Did it do some good things? Yes. Did it force towns that were not up to snuff and many of the things they had to do better? Yes. Can we make that political immediately? Sure we can. There are people, and we know there's an RTM member who last night at the Branford legislature read a letter kind of condemning that law, some untruths in that letter, but we have to make it a point to take a step back, look at what happened, also realize that we are in a world where there is no law that solves every problem. There is no amount of gun laws that are going to avoid mass shootings. You can minimize them. You could lower the percentages of the chances of them happening. There's also no amount of mental health funding that's going to solve these problems. There's always going to be people that get through the cracks. You talk to anybody. Branford funds mental health with a community center, a counseling center, more so than other towns do. Other towns have closed down their counseling centers. Branford funds it, increases funding. What ends up happening, people from other towns that close down come to Branford. There's more pressure on them. How far do you go? And part of the discussion yesterday was, I have kind of two rules as part of the discussions that we have politically. Every budget we talk about, there's people saying we need cuts, we need cuts, we need cuts. One of the rules I've had, and I've moderated political debates, and I've asked this question point blank. I remember doing a Guilford debate with Matt Hoey, and his opponent was talking about cutting spending. And he would talk about cutting spending and talk about cutting spending. And I finally said during the debate, what would you cut? And everybody gives a generic answer to that. They give an answer of, we can, cut 10% easily. We have government waste, and there's a little wink and a nod, and we all know government wastes money. We can, we have too much interest rates or nonsense. If you're going to cut something in government, a real significant cut, you're going to cut jobs. Those people deserve to know who they are. If you're going to cut something, I want real answers on what you're going to cut. Likewise, if you're going to suggest increasing funding in an area, it can't just be, let's increase funding for mental health by raising taxes. I want to know what your priorities are. You want to increase mental health funding? Okay. What do you want to take away from? Let's be real. Do your research, look through the budget, and decide, I prioritize this issue so much that I'm willing to take from other issues that I don't prioritize as much. I may still feel they're important. But this is the problem when we deal with emotions in politics, especially based off events that we've seen in the last couple of days, is we rush to, it needs more money, it needs more funding, it needs yes or more, whatever the case is. We pass a law, but we've never set a priority. We've never actually made a tough decision. So what would you do? If we have money towards more green initiatives, would you take some of that money and put it towards mental health funding? If we have money towards affordable housing, would you take some of that money and put it towards mental housing? What would you take from to put it in affordable housing? And if you're a Democrat talking about some of those left issues, which are fine, I'm a registered Democrat, you have to understand that those that also say we're wasting money or spending money on things that don't make sense or in a way that doesn't make sense can be valid as well. I've made the argument many times, our affordable housing law is nonsense. Yet, every time there's an affordable housing project, Democrats show up with stickers affording it, and it's anti-racism, and we need to support the lower classes. It doesn't do that. It's a nonsense law. So if you're serious about mental health funding, get out a copy of the budget and determine where you would take money from, even issues you may be for, to increase spending on mental health. Give a little bit of credit here to Sean Scanlon. And about, I don't know, he can probably answer this question, 3-4 years ago, he did an exercise, which was a brilliant exercise. And he had anybody who wanted come into the Guilford Community Center, and they broke down all the different portions of a state budget and had people decide what they would put money into, what they wouldn't put money into. And understandably, someone who was a Democrat and leaned left would put money towards those things, who leaned right would put money towards those things. But the vast majority of people, even people who are yelling for more funding for good causes, have never broken down a budget, don't know where the money's going, and also can't explain if the money being spent is spent wisely. We could spend money on new cars. Are we spending money wisely on new cars? We could spend money on affordable housing, but are we spending money wisely on affordable housing? When we see situations where we have $18 million in tax credits going for 60 units at $300,000 a unit, that doesn't make any sense. And so real politicos, people who are not just playing the political game, but are following the process because they want to make real change. They want to see positive impacts of some of the negative things that happen in our world, also have to have an understanding of the budget, where money is spent, and what their priorities are. What are you going to take it from? And so those are the two rules. If you're going to propose a cut, you must specifically say where that cut's coming from. Bob Stefanowski in the last election during debates, they said, where are you going to save money? And he goes, well, everybody knows we can save 10% right off the top. No, I don't know that. Give me specifics. If you're running for office, by now you should have some level of specifics as to what you would cut. And it had to be a huge amount because he wanted to eliminate the income tax over time. Conversely, if you're yelling for more funding and more money for something, you have to be able to explain what you would take it from. It can't just be the generic raise taxes on the rich. Maybe that happens down the road. That can't be your answer. You have to at least show you've done your research and know what you're talking about before we yell about those things. Is there anything in particular that can happen based on what happened in Branford on Tuesday? There's probably no laws. We can yell and scream about police laws. There's no police laws that passed that made us less safe last year. They passed a law in the legislature last month to make sure there was an extended time to implement some of those changes. Most of those changes were already done in Branford anyway. What we saw happen Tuesday is what we were supposed to see happen. A terrible thing happened. Even if mental health funding had been doubled, probably still would have happened. Police responded the right way. We got certainly lucky. It's an unfortunate incident. It's unfortunate that gentleman was shot. We got lucky. There is no such thing as a perfect world. There is no law that solves all these problems. Yelling for more gun control can minimize these, can lessen them. We will never live in a world where they won't happen. At the same time, yelling for more mental health funding will lessen these. We can catch more. We live in a world where we understand there's some risk. And if we're going to propose solutions, we have to find a way to pay for them and decide what our priorities are. And as I go through the conversations we had yesterday, that's the big, we need more money for this. We need to do this. Okay. Answer that question as if you were doing it in your household. I want to spend more money on my mortgage. I want a better house. Where do you take the money from? Do you go on less vacations that year? Do you do less interior design? Do you not take care of landscaping? I want to spend more money on vacations. Okay, where do you take it from? But when it comes to politics, we don't do that. I just want more money for mental health funding. It doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. We need more money for green initiatives. Okay. More money for affordable housing. Okay. More money for police or for fire. Okay. Where is it coming from? And if you're not able to answer that question, it's hard to take that claim seriously. Can we use more money for mental health funding? Of course, everybody knows that. We could triple it and it gets better. We can also quadruple the size of our fire department and we'll be safer. We can pay for a police officer on every corner and we'll be safer. If every condominium complex paid for a security guard in their parking lot, we would reduce the amount of car break-ins, because that's where they all happen to happen, by what? At least half. The question is, what risk are we willing to take? What happened to moderation? I'm just reading some of the comments. What happened to moderation? We get that both sides have points. The answer is in the middle. The answer is in the middle, but there's no advantage to being in the middle sometimes. You know, the politicians on the left and the right often have an agenda, and that agenda isn't the item they're talking about. That agenda is their careers. There are people who are career politicians. In some cases, they're not. You know, I don't know that Christine Cohen is trying to run for governor one day. Sean Scanlon? Yeah, maybe. I know Jamie Cosgrove's not trying to be the president of the United States. It took, you know, a massive act of people to get him to run for first selectman. It was not something he wanted political office. So I have a little more trust for those people. But for the most part, when we talk to those in our state, in federal levels, they have career ambitions. They're going to say and support things that help them push those ambitions. Being moderate isn't always helpful. Read Chris Murphy's Facebook page. I was a huge fan of Chris Murphy early on in his career. What he did so brilliantly was he used to write articles on foreign policy that you could understand. So like foreign wars and funding for, they were really, really good, moderate, intelligent, thought out positions, explaining them. And as he gained in popularity and he's in a position where he can almost never lose, being representing Connecticut, he has become further and further left. Maybe his ideology personally isn't that way, but he's become the voice of the party. He's obviously looking for a higher position at some point, maybe even running for president. And his Facebook page, because of that, becomes angrier. Republicans are evil, or if you're not supporting this, you're crazy. If you're not, you know, that's just not promoting logic and reason. We have people starving, so therefore we must have this stimulus package. Well, that stimulus package has a ton of waste in it. There's logical reasons to not be for that stimulus package. We need to fix our roads, so we need this infrastructure package. Okay, but only a small percentage of this infrastructure package is for our roads. There's a lot of other things that are political agendas put in this thing. So you demonize the other side, but it doesn't mean that you're absolutely right by any means. There's no advantage politically to being in the middle. The advantage if you're a Democrat in Branford or even a Democrat in Connecticut is to keep your base angry, rile them up. Another mass shooting? Oh, it's guns. Oh, we need more money for mental health, so raise taxes. Is that the right answer? Probably not. Volcker, now he just goes after the high value items. Yeah, he goes after the things that will keep his base riled up. So more often than not, you keep the ideological Democrats riled up by demonizing the Republicans. If you're on the Republican side, you keep your base riled up by what? They're bringing socialism and they're destroying our country. None of that's true. None of it's remotely close to true. So what is the right answer to prevent what we had on Tuesday? There may not be one. We could increase mental health funding, but decide where we want to take it from. We can put gun laws in place. I certainly think background checks are appropriate. I think there are guns that really don't belong on the market. Those are my thoughts. I'm open to discussion. I've asked the question if someone can give me the trade-off. What is the benefits to society by having these things? I don't know. Michael, replying to Mike, certainly people with enough pull made life miserable, so they pulled their proposal. Okay, that's on Costco. All right, let's talk about Costco. Costco is here. They applied. They passed planning and zoning. The town at no point ever voted against Costco. I know the Costco representatives. I know the landowners. I know them intimately. I know the people pushing for Costco here. I know the person running the project, Joe Montesano, very well. Talked to everybody, covered every single meeting in Costco. It was too expensive, period. The corruption that I saw, where a document was significantly altered, in my opinion, wrongfully, certainly played a role in raising questions. But Costco pulling out didn't make any sense. When a place like Costco comes to a town, they expect to go to court. There's always going to be people, in this case, a group of Democrats, primarily from Stony Creek, that were pushing against it. They were fighting it. That's because that was the Young DeRoss Democrats. They hated Wayne Cook. There was a huge fight. There was a personal agenda between those two, and they fought against it. It was nonsense. They spread more lies about the project than you can imagine, but it didn't work. It still passed planning and zoning. Costco then withdrew their application before a vote in inland wetlands. It was a stupid decision because the first selectman at the time, and still is, Jamie Cosgrove, had they gone to inland wetlands and been denied, they would have sued the town. Defending the town would have been Jamie Cosgrove and the town attorney. They would have won. They wanted Costco. Jamie Cosgrove was for Costco and for Costco at that site. Had they won the vote at inland wetlands, the opponents would have sued, the town would have defended that, and the town would have won that too. Costco pulled their application. The costs for that site were too high. The amount of road work that had to get that happened, the amount of the wetlands that had to be taken care of, the demands of the land trust, exit ramps that had to be redone, the costs were crazy. They had talked about potentially coming back. That has not happened. After that application was pulled, the vice president, the co-owner for development, passed away. The person who ran the project in Branford left the company. A lot of things changed. Now the economy has drastically changed. So a lot of things happened on Costco. Were there people doing and saying claims that were false? Yes, no question about it. Was that the reason they're not here? I don't think so. Not in my opinion. Richard, what's your thoughts on the Dems wanting to add 4 more people? I think you're referring to the Supreme Court. I would be very, very much against that. I don't think you change the rules because you don't like the outcome. And I'll tell you something about the Supreme Court. I know there's complaints from the left that all these obviously Republicans are on it, but they have made decisions, even as a Republican-led court or conservative court, that have been in favor. They've been balanced decisions. For example, they won a vote on the healthcare law, on Obamacare. So there have been decisions that have been made by the Supreme Court, led by conservatives, that liberals have no problem with. They were happy with. So changing those rules doesn't make sense. And by the way, if anyone's seriously asking a question at the Supreme Court, the next decision, or you do it now, you go online and read the decisions and read some of the objections, the decisions that disagree. They're brilliant. The people who make it to the Supreme Court are truly brilliant. I read those decisions and I'm blown away at the logic and the intelligence and the way they're written in general. Spectacular. And that's from conservatives or liberals. Usually the question isn't about what they want. The question is, what is the interpretation of law? And that's what you want from the Supreme Court. So I would very much object to adding members to try to get a majority. I think that's basically nonsense. Term limits in Congress and Supreme Court, that's another conversation worth having. Okay, let's talk for a second about Bernie Madoff. So he passed away yesterday. Remember when that happened? And at first, I remember my first thought was, yeah, okay, so a bunch of, multimillionaires are out of money. But the truth of the matter is, while there were people who were worth, $400,000 and $400 million, and when suddenly worth $200 million, there were a lot of people who were worth $1 million in retirement and we're down to nothing, or $500,000 and we're down to nothing. There were also many people who, there were funds, there were nonprofits, there were real people who were significantly hurt by that. It's easy to look at him as the enemy, no question. He ran a Ponzi scheme for years. What I always come back to is this. We as taxpayers pay government regulatory agencies to oversee these things, to demand filings on a regular basis, to perform regular reviews of what these either hedge funds or companies are doing. The SEC is supposed to be taking care of this, responding to complaints, managing applications. They have an obligation to do research on behalf of the rest of us. And the common theme with so many of these stories, not just Bernie Madoff, we'll talk about other ones as well, is that a regulatory authority doesn't do their job. In the last storm, Eversource was nowhere near prepared for the amount of outages. And what we found out was, prior to the storm coming, Eversource filed one potential storm level coming in, and UI, which covered other towns, filed a very different filing with PURA, the agency that oversees these companies. They filed it ahead of time. They were drastically different. PURA apparently never realized it, never raised any questions, when they easily could have. And instead we had that massive loss of power for days and days, because the regulatory authority, yes, we can blame Eversource, but the regulatory authority, the people we pay and we fund as taxpayers to oversee those companies, again, didn't do their job. And if you look at all the elected officials, all the tweets, all the emails, all the comments, all the sound bites on TV, Eversource is after crazy. We can't let these companies get away with this. We can't wait, we paid a regulatory authority to cover this. Why are we not taking steps to go after the people who allowed this to happen, who missed all these red flags along the way? When you think about things like Enron, the 2008 crash, over and over and over again, the common theme is that a regulatory authority, an organization paid for by us, by taxpayers, failed to do their job. And then the elected officials go after the CEO, and they arrest, either Ken Lay or Jeffrey Skilling from Enron, or wherever it is from, in the crash. Oh, nobody went to jail in the crash in 2008, 2009. But at the end of the day, it's our regulatory authorities not doing their job. I laugh every time I see an elected official say Eversource dropped the ball again. Eversource is a for-profit company. They're always going to drop the ball. They have a monopoly where they provide power. We elected officials to form a regulatory authority to oversee that. You can't pretend it didn't exist when Eversource doesn't do their job. It's convenient for politicians to yell about these companies. It's always easy to yell about the big bad corporations. And we have press conferences on the steps of town hall where all the elected officials show up and say, we're going to hold these people accountable. Why are you not holding PURA accountable? Why did the government not hold the SEC accountable for Bernie Madoff? The taxpayers paid for those regulatory agencies. The common theme in all of these is that a regulatory agency that was paid to do a job didn't do it. let's not forget and blame the corporation for doing exactly what we expect a corporation to do, which is try to get away with making as much pop money as possible. Some of the questions here is Aldi Chase moving forward across Starbucks. I did see them down there working, surveying the property about last week. I think they are. We'll know for sure pretty soon. The local common sense seems to prevail. They might have gone the popular route while establishing themselves to get on it, but once they're there to seem to understand their position, which is we hoped for the other high offices as well. I'm not sure what that was response to. What about Trader Joe's? There is no plan for Trader Joe's in Branford at this time. They did look at one site, but it didn't work out. Then term limits on Congress. Yeah, Aldi is supposed to come. There is on Planning and Zoning's agenda, if you're watching from Branford, discussion tonight about a residential development on the Giordano property. They will just receive it. I got questions on it yesterday. They were receiving it tonight. There will be no public hearing tonight. They will schedule a public hearing on that. There's been proposals on that before. That's in the next section near the Tabor Drive. I don't know the scope of that project yet. We're waiting to get the plan. But once we get that, we'll talk about that probably Monday or Tuesday in a little more detail. That being said, it was really good to see that everybody kind of calmed down today. We've put a request in on the Supreme Court to have one of the police officers come on the podcast sometime soon. We're waiting for that investigation to close. I am not in the business of trying to compromise an investigation or getting news first. I know I got a lot of emails saying, why it looked like I had gotten some news that day when I was live, and I didn't say it immediately because I'm not going to put anybody at risk. Typically, I'm not on the camera when I'm getting information in, so I can, talk to people, confirm those sources, and then put it forward when it's the best time to put it forward. When I'm getting it in real time, you can see my face. I get it, but we're not going to do that. We didn't know if there were explosives, stuff of that nature on site, and so whatever the case is, the outcome of Tuesday was the best we could possibly get. And there's going to be some, when we talked yesterday briefly about, the PTSD of firefighters and police officers and the law that passed that enabled them to get some paid time off for some of those things. That's absolutely going to be the case here. I don't know, an officer shows up at the scene, there's already shots fired, and then he is pinned down for 5 or 6 hours behind a car or a truck. It is hard at that moment not to be thinking about your life and the risk you're taking. And to rethink, when you chose to be a police officer, that this is where you're going to put yourself. You're going to put yourself in harm's way like this. And so, I know people got upset when we talk about the police. I just have enormous amount of respect for them. I've seen police officers act like assholes. I've seen some on power trips. There's no question about it. There are bad actors, but I've covered them for 11, 12 years. I've seen them save far more lives than they will ever take. And the fact that they go into that spot, now granted, in this case, we got lucky. Police could have done the exact same job and 10 people could have been killed. No question. I'm sure they would have stormed faster, but you just never know. The worst case scenario was avoided. But I'm not a police officer, and I'm not built to be one. I'm not wired to be that guy. I went down to the scene yesterday or 2 days ago, stood on the corner and said, what in the hell am I doing here? I have sources that can give me information. I have everybody, and I went home and took information from my house or from my place, wherever I was. That they do that is unbelievable. And so I will never put out information that is going to put them in harm's way, even if I assume it. I don't care about being first. It doesn't make any difference. I'd rather be reasonable and logical and be accurate than be first, and that will always be what happens on this podcast. I know there's a lot of new viewers to this that didn't know we existed or just coming around. And so part of the emails and messages I got yesterday was, what's your background? Who are you? What made you start this? And next week, I'll spend some time talking about that. It's an interesting story for some that know it. It has to do with religion and leaving that and then joining the Democratic Party and a couple things before I started this business about 11, 12 years ago. And we have a lot of changes in store in the near future as well. So I hope you'll join with us for that. For those, I don't like always, I don't know, it's almost uncomfortable, but I know we've got some questions. If you want to donate, you're welcome to. If you go to our website, Branford7.com, a pop-up comes up. You can either make a one-time donation or subscribe, do $10 or $15, $20 a month if you want to. Everything we do is free. I don't charge for anything, but if you want to support it, we welcome that. What we will be doing in the near future is going out and talking to more advertisers and bring more advertisers on. We reach a lot of people, and a lot of advertisers have approached us, and we'll start doing more of that in the near future as well. So if you're a business and you want to talk to us about a package and sponsorships here or ads on our site or a combination of both, we'd love to hear from you. Just send me a text message or an email, and we'll go from there. Today's sponsor was Shoreline Menus. If you don't know what Shoreline Menus is, it's basically Uber Eats, but a local company. They're on the shoreline. So they have most of the local restaurants. And the thought process behind that was, especially during the pandemic, we wanted to support as many restaurants as we could. So people were going to Uber Eats, paying this huge corporation to help those small businesses. Shoreline Menus is a local business started by a local restaurant, and which helps our local business restaurants even more. So if you're going to order, get delivery, check out Shoreline Menus. You'll be helping a local company as well. Guys, I want to thank you for a not a great week, just a week that in many ways we want to forget. But I think there's a lot to be thankful for when we look at how this week went and how much worse it could have been. And I'm grateful to live in a town like Branford that has the police and fire and all the neighboring towns that rush to our aid to solve this problem in the best possible outcome. On that note, I hope you all have a phenomenal weekend, and I will see you all Monday at 4 o'clock. Have a great night.